Welcome everybody to today's session on Research.gov. So before we start, I'm just going to give a couple of Zoom reminders. So if you experience any Zoom technical issues, please call 1-888-799-9666 and choose option 2. Your audio will be streamed through your speakers. Please submit questions at any time during the presentation to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. This recording, the slides, and the session summary will be posted to our website, fdp.org, after the meeting. So I'm going to pass it off to Stephanie Yee of NSF to kick off the session.
Thank you so much. So let me get my screen share ready. All right, I just want to confirm that you guys can see my presentation.
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you, and thank you for having me. Thank you for joining the Research.gov update. So my name is Stephanie Yee, and I'm the IT project manager here at NSF, and I primarily work on operations and maintenance across Research.gov, Fastlane, and the Grants.gov integration. So for today, for this hour, we're going to give you some updates about where we are in the migration process from moving everything from Fastlane to Research.gov. I'm going to highlight some of our most recent proposal enhancements that we released last weekend. And I'm hoping to spend the majority of our time to go over the demo, and I'll be going into the Research.gov demo system and showing you a bit of the highlights of the features that we just released. And then also diving into some of the sections which are commonly, which I see commonly called at IT Help Central, and talk a little bit about the proposal uploads over there, and then cover some of the resources that you have at the end of this presentation. All right. So goodbye, Fastlane, and hello, Research.gov. We have been aggressively trying to move usage over to Research.gov as much as possible. We have an important notice, 147, that was released a little over a year ago that just told the community that we're moving proposal submission to Research.gov. We have a date. We are trying to implement this by the time of the PAT-G implementation of 23-1. So that will occur during the month of January 2023. So a little bit under a year to go. Part of our migration strategy is to start moving solicitations over to be Research.gov only. So when you're looking at solicitations at NSF, take a look at the top where there's important information and revision notes. There may be a sentence there or a paragraph there that notifies you that NSF is no longer taking proposals through Fastlane, and that Research.gov is the only place that you can go. However, remember that Grants.gov will always remain as an option for people to submit proposals to. This next slide references program descriptions. So these are opportunities at NSF which do not deviate from the PAT-G. So program descriptions are a little unique, meaning every program description at NSF shares the same similar boilerplate language. So it was challenging for us to, how do we communicate that some requires Research.gov and others do not. So this is a sample screenshot of a PD here at NSF. And on the right-hand side, in the right column, there will be a text that says this: alert, many NSF programs are only accepting proposals in Research.gov. Click here for more information. When you click on that link, you will receive, or you will get a PDF document which explains why we're doing this, links to important information. But most importantly, it will have a link to each directorate. And when you click on that link to the directorate, it'll take you to a section that will let you know which PDs for that directorate is a Research.gov only opportunity. In addition to that, it will have an effective date. So some of these are not effective until August or September. So take a look at the effective date. We want to give people at least 90 days notice before that is required. I'm going to go over some common or what you need to know in terms of preparation tips. I will go over this probably a couple times in the demo. So the first thing to notice is that proposal information is not shared between the two systems. So what that means is you cannot transfer proposal data from one system to another. If you start a proposal in Fastlane, there's not a way for you to copy that data to the other system. They do not know about each other. So this applies to other records in each system, including letters of intent and prelim proposals. So if you prepare a letter of intent in Fastlane, that letter of intent would not be found in Research.gov and vice versa. So that's something to keep in mind. Also for PFUs, so if you have a proposal file update or a budget revision, those two things have to be done in the system that the proposal was submitted in. So I can see that's a little bit of a challenge for administrators who have to figure out which system was used. Similarly, with separately submitted collaborative proposals, the entire set needs to be done in one system. So make sure all the people that you're working with know that. And the last bullet to take away is that all proposals are evaluated in the same way. They look the same regardless of which system they are used in. So this next slide is talking about where we are and what's ahead. So we started this migration process back in 2018, and we started out, with humble beginnings with a basic research proposal. Ever since then, we've been incrementally adding more and more features to cover the whole breadth of proposal types and things that people can do in Fastlane. I'm not going to go over this entire set, but what the takeaway is, the current capabilities list is getting larger and the things that are still left over is getting smaller. The major items that are still out that we have not migrated yet to Research.gov are what I call special postdocs. So those are postdoc fellowships that require reference letters. So most of them don't require this, but these are the few that do. Also SBIR and STTR opportunities. The second one is the grants.gov integration. So currently, if you're using grants.gov, that proposal in its soul is still a Fastlane proposal. If you have to do updates to that, you still have to go to Fastlane to do that. There will be a point where it will be cut over. So grants.gov proposal will be a Research.gov proposal. We're targeting that probably late summer or early fall. Also, post-award actions are not yet over there. Those include supplemental funding that has not been moved over. This slide is just a really bright reminder that effective PAPG 23-1, no new Fastlane proposal submission will be available and everything has to be done in Research.gov. Pausing here before I move on to our most recent enhancements. All right. So we had a pretty big release last weekend. We have introduced a new proposal type. So these are postdoc fellowships, ones that do not require reference letter writers. We added a couple new features. One is project data forms. So this is a specific form to one director at NSF, but we have implemented that. We've implemented some changes to how you can change or indicate where your proposal might be considered at NSF. We call this secondary units of consideration or where to apply if you go by the wizard step 2 title. And also we've implemented a change to other supplementary documents. You can now upload more than one document and you no longer have to merge everything into one file. So I think that will make a lot of people happy. I'll go over these next slides very briefly because they will be screenshots I will show in the demo. So this is a really quick project data form. This will only apply to certain programs. We have changed the way the secondary units of consideration works a little bit. So I'll show you that in the wizard. It is something that you can change once the proposal is created. And this is I think it's pretty exciting. We can now allow multiple files for other supplementary documents. I know that will solve some problems for people. All right, if there's no questions, I'm just going to double check the chat. I'm going to switch my screen to the demo system. All right, can everyone see my website? It should be the research.gov homepage.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I am logged in as myself, and I wanted to point out the demo site is available to anyone with an NSF ID. So even if you are not a PI or you don't have AOR access, anyone can sign up for an NSF ID. You just have to be over 13 years old. And once you get that account, if you hover over the upper navigation, there'll be a link for you to select the demo site. So I'm going to do that now as well. So this demo site is really helpful for people who want to test uploading or test how the workflows look as you prepare each item. So in the demo site, only these two boxes are enabled, the prepare new and the in progress proposal. We're right now not able to do the submitted because that's a little more complicated. Most people are here to see how the uploads work. So I'm going to go ahead and create new, and I'm going to select full proposal. So one change you might notice, so for myself, I have multiple organizations. I am both an NSF person and I'm also a postdoc fellow. So one thing to note, if you are completely new to the system and you are an unaffiliated PI, you want to apply for a fellowship, you have to add that role to yourself. So you would get this new dropdown. So before this demo, I added myself as a postdoc fellow. And so this will now be a modal that will always pop up as I prepare new items. I'm going to go ahead and select National Science Foundation. And I'm taken here to the wizard where most of you might be familiar with. So here's finding an opportunity. And this is a filtered list and a curated list. So we only list opportunities here, which are eligible in Research.gov. Almost all of them are here. So I'm going to go ahead and select 22534. So step 2 is where to apply, and this is where some of the changes were made in the last release. So for this opportunity, just remember step 2 is tailored to what you selected in step 1. So for this solicitation, this is the only program I can apply to. However, I may have a need to request some other director or some other program for me to request to a co-review. This is just something I might want to add on the cover sheet. So I will show you how to do that, but I can't do it at this step. I have to wait. So after step 2, I'm going to move forward to proposal type. So here is also I would say a page where the responses you see here is dependent on what you choose in the previous steps. So anything you cannot select, it will automatically have this red cursor. You can't select something you shouldn't. So I'm going to go ahead and select research. And then the last step is to ask you whether or not you are a single proposal with or without subawards, or if you're submitting as a set. I'm going to go ahead and click this just for a moment. And I'm going to say I'm a lead proposer. So notice how the proposal title pops up here, and there are words here, collaborative research here. I can't edit this. So Research.gov has built in this concept, which is not in Fastlane, which is prepending the title. So depending on what kind of proposal you have or what kind of submission you're doing, we will prepend titles to the beginning. So for example, we will always put collaborative research here. If you have a different proposal type, so if you have a rapid proposal, for example, it will say collaborative research rapid, and then the title. So just know that that is there. That is not something you can overwrite or overcome. So be aware of the titles. So I'm going to go ahead and update my title. One other change we did implement in May, I hope everyone's happy about, is you can't have special characters in the title, but we were made aware due to feedback that apostrophes were preventing people from being entered. So I'm happy to report we are now allowing apostrophes, and people can prepare proposals with apostrophes. All right, so I have completed my wizard step and I'm now on the main proposal screen. And just to orient everyone, I'm going to make this a little smaller. At the top are I call them proposal header stuff, which are titles, funding opportunity, the type of proposal, where to apply. And at the bottom here, we have proposal actions, which is onto the left-hand side, things you can do to it. And then in the middle is your sections, so that it is broken up by required and optional. This is a good way for an administrator to just take a glance at all the sections to make sure they are there. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bigger and focus on where to apply. So as I mentioned before, you were not able to choose something different in step 2 about where you want your proposal to be considered, but you may want to have someone else take a look at it. So there's a new link here that says manage where to apply. And you'll get a screen that looks like the step 2 that you saw before. So this will give you an opportunity to choose a different directorate, different program outside of the one you're applying to. And you can select multiple. One thing to note is that you can order this, but you can order it only within the category, if that makes sense. So number 2 and number 3 are other units of consideration. They can only be ordered amongst themselves. You can never overtake what's in slot number 1, because that's the main program that you're applying to. So all this means is as you add more and more programs to here, what's shown on the cover sheet is, of course, the one that's in first place, and I believe the one's in second place. And then anything third place beyond will show on the cover sheet, but on the supplemental page, which is like the 3rd page, I think.
Hey, Stephanie, let me pause
Yes.
you right there. Alice was asking a common question, but can you change the solicitation number once you've already started the proposal?
That's a very good question and a common question. Unfortunately, no. So right now, the only things you can change are the title and the secondary units of consideration, which is where to apply. You cannot modify funding opportunity, proposal type, submission type, or collaborative type once the proposal is created. I understand Fastlane gave that flexibility, but Fastlane is not performing the same compliance checks as we are. Unfortunately, just because we are, trying to build more meaningful business rules and a better user experience, we really have to be able to lock this down to the opportunity you selected. So it's not easy for us to allow people to change this because requirements per solicitation is so different. Some solicitations allow 20-page project descriptions. We can't have a situation where you uploaded a 20-page, but then you switch the opportunity to something that is an 8-page. So at this time, there's no plans to allow that change. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, but I would say it's pretty difficult at this stage. But right now, just the way we're doing validations, that's not possible at this point. You would have to start a new proposal.
Okay, and while we've got you paused, can we go back a little bit? And Alice also asked, in terms of submitting proposals via grants.gov, besides the collaborative proposals, are there any other limitations on grants.gov you can think of?
No, there's no limitations. I'll say there's things to consider if you're using grants.gov, because there's I call it like the third party, there's a third party involved. It may take a little longer to troubleshoot your ticket if you have an issue where the proposal is not being submitted or seen properly here at NSF. It's just extra checkpoints for us to look into. So just know that from a timing perspective, don't wait till the last minute to report a grants.gov issue because those just take longer to troubleshoot. So I would just say, give yourself a little more time to do that. The other, not limitation, but just caveat to know is that if solicitations have multiple deadlines, I think in grants.gov it's not easy to see all the different dates. So if a solicitation has multiple tracks, just be extra careful, double check your solicitation to make sure that what you are applying to specifically is being met. So those are give yourself more time. And if you have a complicated solicitation, double check your dates. But there's no other limitations. Oh, the third limitation I know of is grants.gov. You cannot apply towards the PAPG in grants.gov. It has to be for a solicitation or a PD. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So the next thing I would like to share is the other new thing that we added was the other supplemental documents. So here, as I mentioned before, you no longer have to take your documents and squish them onto one place. That was very problematic for people, especially with letters of support or that type of document where there is a a letter from a company or a university that has a letterhead and a signature to it. So what we were finding is that people were unable to merge documents into one giant one if there was a certified signature on a PDF. So this was something, I didn't quite imagine would happen, but in the old FastLane days, people printed these things out and they scanned them in. But now Adobe PDF is a lot more complex, and we have things like digital signatures and locked documents. So just be aware, it's not just other supplemental documents, but for any section you have, if you upload a document and you see something that says unexpected error, I would say the first thing to check is to see if that document is protected in some way. Either a password is on it or it's locked. So just double check that. Definitely call IT Hub Central so we can take a look at it. But that is something especially common with other supplementary documents because people are uploading letters in this space. All right. So I'm not going to demo that because I think everyone knows what uploading multiple files look like. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to project description. Oh, since I'm here and I'm reminded, on the right-hand corner is your due date. So I think we get a lot of calls about people being unable to push their proposal forward. I think it's because they missed this little gray box in the corner here. You have to select a due date. And for some reason, it's not as intuitive for people to look up there, but just make sure that it's selected and you're selecting a date that's in the future. Okay, project description. All right, I'll spend a little time on here since it is probably the #1 section that IT Hub Central gets calls for. So for each section, especially project descriptions, there are errors and there are warnings. So warnings you will get in a yellow box, but it will not stop proposal submission. So right now, I would say the warning that we see the most are line spacing warnings. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to upload one of these. So this might be something you have all seen. So for line spacing warnings, these are some things to consider, maybe put your mind at ease. We're finding that Arial 10 is a little more susceptible to line spacing errors versus any other font. So there are 3 fonts in the PAPG that accept a 10 font. I believe it's Courier New. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but I know the third one is Palatino. Those in size 10 seem to have fewer issues than Arial 10. Arial 10 seems to always get this issue. So let me show you something in Word. Make this a little bigger. So I have here just pasted, a bunch of gibberish in Arial 10. So Microsoft Word and other word processing softwares. If you notice, the spacing between the header, broader impacts, and the spacing within the paragraph is slightly different. And that is something out of your control, but it is something that the software is doing for you. So if you highlight this entire piece and you click on the paragraph styles, oh, not that one, paragraph. Under spacing, you'll notice that it'll probably say multiple or something else. It has to be exactly 12 points. This will force the entire document to respect the spacing in between each line. We'll go back to the. So I would say if you are confident that is the reason why your document is receiving this warning, I would say if you have time, definitely go back into Word and make sure that you enforce the spacing in between. IT Hub Central would never tell you to ignore the warning and just move on with your life. And the reason is we don't know if on page 7 of your 15-page document that you truly have a violation of the line spacing error. So unfortunately, this message doesn't tell us where or how prevalent that spacing error is. It can only tell you, hey, please go back and double check. So I say if you are using Arial 10 and you don't like this message, take the time to force the spacing or send it into IT Hub Central. But if you don't have the time, experiment with the other fonts. They are less problematic than Arial 10. And as some of you, if you're working on proposals today, we do have a bug that was introduced last week. We're hoping to fix it, not this weekend, but the next weekend. We do have a bug right now that if you at least encounter the line spacing warning at least once, it will remain showing to you, even if you correct it. So we realize that's not helpful. If you want to know if your file's fixed, just call IT Help Central and we can test the file for you. All right, I'm going to pause there since I talked a lot about line spacing.
Well, there was a different question from Anne Marie. She wanted you to check your the heading where it's top of some of the pages. It says Stephanie Yee postdoc when you had selected National Science Foundation as your institution.
That is something I did not notice. It should not say postdoc scholar, right? It should only say PI. Okay.
Good catch.
You may have caught a bug. I will let my team know about that. It should be the PI because I am doing this as a PI. Thank you. All right, back to project description. So most of you have had experience with our fonts and margins. So I do want to say we have relaxed those during this transition period. So they are currently not being displayed, but you're still beholden to the PAT-G requirements and they could be checked later when it's at NSF. So just know that that has been temporarily relaxed, but there will be a point where we will reintroduce those. But it will not, we would just have to do some reevaluations because we do recognize there is some interesting behaviors we're seeing when people are using softwares, different software, open software, things that are not Microsoft Word, or even different versions of Microsoft Word are enforcing margins differently from each other. So these are things that we heard from your feedback, which is very valuable. So this is the reason why we're kind of taking a second look at those. The only other error we check, I believe here, other than page counts and things like that, is the title broader impacts must exist in your project description. So for the most part, people are able to bypass this, but just things to remember, broader impacts must be on its own line. It cannot have any other text to it. So be careful if you're numbering your headers. So I've seen broader impacts that have it's under, I don't know, people using Roman numerals, just section 2.b, all that extra characters is going to make the system think you have other text on that line. So be careful, try to avoid numbering, Roman numerals, commas, and also be careful about centering broader impacts. Sometimes that will add hidden spaces on each side. So that will also count as spaces. The other thing I'm seeing are LaTeX users. So most of you probably support some LaTeX users and they had issues with the system in the previous years. So we think that by relaxing some of the rules for fonts and margins, that has primarily been okay, but broader impacts seem to impact LaTeX users a lot. And I want to announce to everyone, we do have a resource for LaTeX users. It's going to be in the deck, but I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen to this website. It's called github.com. So it is like an open source repository for people to share code. And so NSF collaborated with some volunteer program officers. And what we've done, I'm not a LaTeX user, so most of this stuff doesn't make sense to me, but it'll make sense to your scientists. We have placed here some samples. So sample templates that they can look at and use as reference when they're creating their own LaTeX files. And my understanding is depending on your science, on your discipline, you might have preference for different LaTeX packages. We put a couple here just to try to capture that audience, physics, maths, etc. And then some tips about, some commonly seen issues that they might see as LaTeX users. This is available. Everyone can take a look at it. I think it'll be very valuable for your LaTeX users. And if they have feedback, let me know what that is, and we will continuously update this site. All right. Any questions? And the last thing I want to talk about in project description are URLs. So as noted in the PAT-G, URLs are not allowed in the project description. So you cannot have any clickable links in your project description. But sometimes it still trips people up because they can't see a link and you're getting this error and you can't move on. So I would say the most commonly thing I'm seeing are, one, people have text that looks like a link. So they're not clickable, but if you have anything in your document that starts with www, or you have a text that starts with HTTP, HTTPS, that would be flagged as a URL. Even though it's not clickable, we think those are the common characters that begin a URL, so we don't want to see that. So please remove those. The second most common thing I'm seeing are citations. So sometimes people use third-party tools. I think Google has one that allows, I guess, easy linking between citations and then your paper. They can embed links inside the paper that you can't see, but if you hover over it, you can see it. So just be aware of citations. Those are the first two places I would check. All right. Any questions before I move on to some other sections?
There was a question about a specific solicitation, which I'm doing research on right now. So I'll post an answer if I find anything. And then Amy Mock was asking whether we're recording and posting this. And Sarah, do you want to answer that, where people can find this recording? Yeah, I don't know if Sarah's picking up, but yes, the slides and the recordings are posted on the FDP site, and I think it takes about a week or so.
Yeah, the slides. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, yeah, the slides will be posted. We usually post them on Friday or the following Monday.
And what about the recordings?
Yeah, the slides and the recordings all together.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, I see a question about is prohibiting URLs a feature or a bug? It is a feature. It is in PAPG, you can't have URLs. But if you think the interpretation of that is not quite right, you think there is a really strong case that you guys should be able to add those, I would say, give us feedback or contact the policy office. We take our marching orders from them and, kind of explain what's the business case for that. And I think, maybe something will change. All right, I'm going to really quickly go to share proposal and manage personnel. So my understanding is some people might be preparing proposals for PIs, and how can I do that as an administrator easily in this system? Because in Fastlane, there is a handy dandy button to switch, PIs, and there's not a feature like that in Research.gov. So I recommend this. No matter if you're a PI or AOR or whoever you are, if you're creating a proposal, I recommend the first thing you do is share access to your proposal to your AOR staff. By default, no one can see this proposal except the PI. Click on Change Proposal Access for SPO AOR and click on Edit Access. This will allow the AOR staff to be able to see it and edit it as they wish. Think very carefully whether or not you want to allow the ability for the AORs to submit. I can see why some people may not want to check this box right away. They want to see it before a submission is made. However, don't forget that you uncheck this. One of the most common thing I see is the AOR cannot submit their proposal. They don't know why, and it's because the PI forgot to check this checkbox. So just make sure your access is in order. And also in the screen, this will, because I haven't uploaded anything, you'll get all these wonderful error messages. I'm going to move on to manage personnel just to point out some things. So here's where you manage your personnel for yourself and for sub-awardees, but I'm going to go ahead and just stick to myself. Amanda, I see your question. Do PIs need to share proposals with OAUs? Yes. So I'll show you that now. So here's where you add senior personnel and other authorized user. So for co-PIs, you must choose one or the other, NSF IDs or email addresses. I always recommend NSF IDs because they're a little more accurate. And here I'm going to go ahead and select Josh. One thing to note here is one of the most common questions I see is I search for a PI and they don't show up. Just note that if you grant roles to people, it takes up to 30 minutes to apply. I know that's not very intuitive. You would imagine it would happen right away, but it could take 30 minutes, maybe up to an hour for a role to show up. So if you granted Josh Abbott PI roles at 3 o'clock, they may not show up yet. So just be aware there is a time delay, and that is for any role. So that's AOR role, PIs, OAUs, all that will apply. So I'll go ahead and add Josh. And then down to OAU. So OAU is the same deal. It's NSF ID or email address. I would say the only thing you cannot do here is you cannot add somebody here that is already on the proposal. So that means if the person is a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel, you cannot add them as other authorized user. So unfortunately, you cannot, and unfortunately, senior personnel cannot have access to the proposal due to these rules. And I don't think, and I do think there is a business case to allow senior personnel to access the proposal, but again, please give feedback on that. All right, if there's no questions on senior personnel, I'm going to move on to the budget. Just really quickly. So this is the budget screen, and I'm going to hide this menu. So there's a nice little trick to give you more horizontal space. I'll make this a little bigger. So this budget I really like because it's dynamic, meaning as you enter data here, your totals will update. It will also validate invalid characters. And not only that, it can validate, depending on your proposal. So some proposal types don't allow, larger than X amount. This will check that for you. One thing that people miss sometimes is the ability to remove senior personnel from the budget. So under senior personnel section, you can click manage and remove people as you see fit. So one question I often get is do we plan to have an offline budget template like we do in Fastlane? And so the answer is no. We don't have any plans to do that at this time. It will unlikely not be in the future as well, just because of how the validations work on this screen. So remember, Fastlane is not doing hardly any checks compared to what Research.gov is doing. We really want people to use the budget form because it is doing a lot of budget checks and business rule checks. And we think it's very beneficial of you to enter this on the web form. If it is a file upload, we won't be able to show that as well. Any questions on the budget?
Stephanie, not on budget, but there's the question which you fielded several times. What about co-investigators and how you can, add them first, give them OEU status first, then delete as other, and then add as senior personnel later. So it's the old swapping PIs trick.
Can I give OEU status first? So, Leanne, I'm just going to say it's a little cumbersome to do a lot of the senior personnel switching. One common question I get, I don't know if this is what you're alluding to, is what if I'm the OA or I'm a staff member, but I'm not an AOR staff member, and I need to create a proposal on behalf of someone else. Maybe I'm a department head, or maybe I'm a student, and then I'm trying to do a proposal where the PI, eventually I will switch the PI. It is not that, it's doable, but it's not very easy to do in terms of interface. I would say call IT Help Central, but basically in a nutshell, whoever starts the proposal, go ahead, add the AOR staff as having access to that, add the people that you need. And then when you delete yourself, because you're in the prime PI slot, somebody else who has access to the proposal needs to add you back. So that could be an AOR staff member. You have to call the AOR and say, hey, I deleted myself and I need access to the proposal. or you have to add an OAU that will add you back to the proposal. I don't know if that answers your questions, but yeah, it's a little bit of a multi-step process to move people around. And that being said, if you are doing something like that, if you're not the PI and you're not going to be ultimately the PI, and you know you're going to be adding, removing people, I highly recommend you get that in order before you upload your senior personnel documents, which I'm going to go to next. So here are your senior personnel. I've only added Josh, so you only see 2 names here. As you add more and more senior personnel, co-PIs, this list will get longer, and you can click expand all and see everybody's required documents. So here you can see, scroll down with your eyes to see who has their bio sketch uploaded and who hasn't, and who still has a problem. So I'm just talk a little bit about current and pending support, because it does have some little features to it. So current and pending support, remember, for current pending support and BioSketch, you have 2 available forms to you. You have the Science CV form and the fillable PDF form. From a production support standpoint, if my friend was working on a proposal, I would say I would lean towards Science CV. And the reason I would lean towards Science CV is it is a format that is generated for you, and you don't have to touch that document. It's generated right away. That form is good to go. You can upload that. The fillable PDF is a little more problematic, and that is because there are multiple and infinite amount of applications out there that can enter data in a PDF form, and they're not all good. So for example, Dropbox, I have been made aware, has its own PDF editor. Well, if you use that on a current and pending support, it will wipe out some of the important metadata that we are looking for, and that form will not upload properly. So I think Foxic Pro is another one that can change or alter the PDF metadata to something we're not expecting. So just be aware of that if you're not using something standard like Acrobat Adobe, that when you're modifying fillable PDFs with freeware software, it could alter that file. So just be aware of that. Don't wait to the last minute to discover this. Just make sure these things are caught earlier. The other interesting thing about current pending support is that the fillable version is 27 pages long, and we built in a trimming capability, which means that we would take this large document, and if the majority of the pages are blank, this system will trim those pages. So what we do is we take a look at each form, see what's been filled out, and trim them accordingly. So for this example, only the first 3 pages are filled out. So these are the only pages that are uploaded. The page numbers are not renumbered. We just trim them. I highly recommend that people double check the files that they uploaded. Sometimes the trimming goes awry, and that is because people are using software that we're not expecting. The software sometimes changes the code in that PDF to something we're not expecting. So just be aware of that and be extra careful with current pending support. All right, any questions on current pending? If not, I'm going to move on to COA documents. So this is quite a painful document for a lot of people, I believe. So some tips about this. I do like this form, this upload process. Maybe not the form, but just the upload process, because it can detect errors within your document, and it can pinpoint the error to the table, to the row, and to the column. So this is really useful for you to detect whether or not someone put an invalid character or invalid item in one of the tables. I even tell people who are, Fastlane ride or die users, they don't want to use Research.gov. It's like, hey, if you're having problems with COA document, at least check your file there. This will give you really accurate information about which columns or tables are missing or broken. The most common thing I see on this document, you guys probably have encountered it, is that I don't get an error when I upload, but when I look at the document, some of the values are blank or everything is blank. So I'll tell you what causes that and some of the most common reasons I see that. Google Sheets. Do not use Google Sheets. I love Google Sheets personally, but Google Sheets will remove some of the code that we are looking for in that Excel document. So if you use Google Sheets, all that code is missing, and therefore it cannot detect and extract the data appropriately. So avoid Google Sheets and be wary of any Excel-like programs that's not Microsoft Excel. The second thing I see most common are people are putting invalid dates in the date field. So there is a column on each table, I believe, that has a date and last active date. It has to be in a month, day, year format. Don't put words there. Don't put present or currently. No words, date, or leave it blank, and upload the file. All right. Second tip I would say is if you know your COA document is going to be pretty long. I've seen some that would have over 200 personnel on it. Do yourself a favor and test the file periodically. It's really hard to troubleshoot a file that has so many people on it. I would say things that cause broken PDFs are foreign characters. So be careful of universities or people outside of the country, because they might have like special characters, like tildes or whatever. And also be careful about cutting and pasting with formatting. So sometimes people use, maybe they're using Google Sheets, but they're pasting in an Excel document that could carry over some unexpected things. All right, any questions about COA, everyone's favorite form? All right, any questions? So one question I get about senior personnel documents, and click on here again, is, if I had 10 people here, can I control the order of those 10 people, and can I control the order of their documents in the print PDF? So the short answer is no. This list, I believe, is listed by the way you add it, and then the sections within the proposal is differing. I do want to say, don't get frustrated. Don't pull your hair out if you notice that the current and pending people are listed in a different order than BioSketch. I know it is slightly different. So just, I would say don't let that be something that stops you from submitting. Just be aware that is something you cannot directly control. Okay. I see a question. Do the problems of special characters pertain only to COA? I'm going to say it could impact other sections, but the other sections escape me now. Titles cannot have special characters. You can't have special characters in the budget. I think anything you upload would be okay. The reason the COA documents can't have the special characters is it just breaks the coding on those tables. Those tables have some validations in them, so that's why it breaks there. But anything you upload, like a project description, should not have a problem with special characters. Hope that answers your question. I see your question, Joan, about is there an issue about international email addresses? I am not aware of any issues with international email addresses. So I'd love to know more. Can you email me offline? Just tell me a little bit more about that. I haven't heard about that. Okay. All right. Any questions on those three sections before I move on? Okay. Oh, I'm gonna check my time. All right, I have 10 minutes left. So let me see if I have anything else to show you. So actually, I'm going to leave the rest of the time for questions. And if there's a particular section people want to see, I'll be happy to show it. And if I don't see questions, I might dive into the cover sheet to talk a little bit about prelim proposals and proposals that require prelims or letters of intent. Do you think I can continue on the cover sheet? All right. So one thing I want to show, I was waiting if I had a little extra time, is to dive into the cover sheet for a moment. So the cover sheet is I would actually say it's a section that we rarely get calls about, but we did make a change in the last release regarding full proposals that require or have optional prelim proposals or letters of intent. So I just wanted to point out something that has changed slightly in the May release. So for each solicitation, we have either you require a letter of intent, require a prelim, or it's optional. So if you require it before this release, we were enforcing, not only is there a number here, so right now you see prelim proposals. We will validate that number. So I'm gonna go ahead and click save. And do you remember at the beginning of my presentation that we can only recognize prelims in the same system? So what we've changed here is even if the solicitation requires a prelim, we don't force you to have one here. So this will help accommodate people who maybe submitted their prelim proposals in Fastlane and they are ready to submit a full in Research.gov. This will allow them to move forward. It also helps accommodate solicitations with multiple tracks. So that was the #1 reason why we did this. Multiple tracks means that one solicitation number, but maybe one track requires it and one doesn't. The way we had it when we were forcing it, it basically prevented one of the tracks from submitting. So we've changed the system to now it's optional. You can leave it blank or you can enter it in, but we will double check it's a valid number. To accommodate people or solicitations with multiple tracks or people who decided to submit their proposal in another system. So I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions.
Well, there's a good one about UEIs and for subrecipients. They have one that's delayed in getting their UEI assigned. And can you explain what they should do?
Okay. Let's see. I'm not sure if policy is on the call, but I believe PAPG says your subawardees do not need to be registered in SAM. I'm hoping someone would correct me on that. So I am aware of people who are trying to add subawardees and they don't have an active registration. And I believe the PAPG says that is not required. The system does not implement it that way. The system will ask you and stop you, right? Is what you're referencing. If you have a subawardee and they don't have an active SAM registration, maybe they're brand new or whatever, call ITF Central right away. We do have workarounds, but that requires some backend changes by a developer. It's not instantaneous. So there is a workaround. So call ITF Central. The moment you get that message, call ITF Central, give us the name of the subawardee, and we can work that out for you. So I hope that answers your question, Stephanie. Call ITF Central right away. Okay. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. UEIs, but they don't need SAM registration. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, I would say the only other thing I want people to be aware of, I should have mentioned this during current pending support. So I do want people to just know this and just be prepared for it. So the two sections, project description, the two biggest sections, as the most complicated sections, are project description and current pending support. Those two sections tend to be large documents. I just want you to be aware. I don't see it very often anymore because the weather is beautiful outside, but I did notice an uptick of people being unable to upload those documents in the January timeframe where everybody was under some sort of winter advisory and people were working from home. So one thing to note is that the uploads of these massive documents can be problematic if you are on I won't say unstable connection, but a connection that is not as good as being plugged into your university. So what we found is a lot of times these people were in their kitchens or they're at Starbucks or someplace that's wireless. We recommended people to find a more stable connection, or maybe they're on a cruise boat or out of the country. We saw a lot of that. So just be aware for these bigger documents, make sure you have a good connection or you have someone that is physically plugged into a very good connection for those two sections. You can call IT help. All right, I'm going to swap back to the presentation to finish up some of the resources that you have to help you with proposal submission. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. All right. So I mentioned this a couple times before, but please, please, please provide feedback. We want people to use the system because we want to hear your feedback. And this is like the best time to give feedback because we have all hands on deck to fix issues as they come up. So this is the prime time to get some of your suggestions in. There's a feedback button on the bottom of the footer of Research.gov. It's also on the demo site. Please give us our feedback. Something's broken, tell us. If something needs to be submitted, call IT Help Central. The feedback form is not, it is monitored, but it is just because we get so much feedback, we just can't answer everyone's emails. So I did the entire demo with the demo site. So this is just some more details about how to access it. Anyone with an NSF ID can access it. I would also like to highlight a webinar that is coming up on May 26th. It is coming up. It is titled the Career Proposal Submission Logistics Webinar, but I want to stress it is not just for career people or people who are applying for career. This could be anyone who is new to Research.gov and are maybe new PIs. We're just going to go over basic logistics of using the system and how to submit it. So please share this with your colleagues. Also like to talk about the help resources that you have. We're constantly updating this every release, and just keep looking for it. We have videos, we have quick guides, quick tips, and lots of embedded help. And this is a slide in case you want to share this with your LaTeX users. And then within each page, I just want to highlight, look out for the blue I button that will give you more definitions and explanation for each section. And this is some resources for you. I highly recommend that people subscribe to the listserv. We update the listserv pretty frequently after each release. These are just contacts for questions. And thank you for your participation. And I can take questions for 3 more minutes.
Hey, Stephanie. Sam Hunter in policy weighed in on the UEI for subawardees. So she says GSA and OMB aware of it, and there's currently no workaround. And then Joan was asking really interesting questions. I think this is pretty common around the project summary. Do the headers, the overview, broader impacts, need to be on their own line? We've had some issues uploading those.
Yes, they do. I'll just open it up really quickly. Summary, right?
Yeah, project summary, right?
So you must have
impacts.
overview, intellectual merit, and broader impacts.
On their own line.
On their own line.
Yeah.
So some like, I guess, last resort troubleshooting, some people who are using LaTeX or maybe something weird has gone on and they can't identify the header. Sometimes IT Help Central will suggest taking a PDF editor and just erasing it and then retyping it. And that sometimes solves most of the problems. So if you have a PDF editor, you're short on time, you could do that and that would recognize the header.
And then Alice asked for RUIs. What solicitation number do you use? And yeah, we may have to check that offline for RUIs. So,
there are specific RUI solicitations, but if you are an RUI institution, what I've seen is people are requested to put RUIs in the title. I don't know if there was any comments from policy or anyone else from NSF, but there's not an RUI proposal type per se.
And then lastly, Joan was, I think, following up on the email with the non-US extensions, talking about it was an XLS attachment in the proposal. Joan, could you confirm that? That's where you were talking about the issue with the email addresses?
I've never seen that. Excel inside of project description. Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Where we had she was asked, yeah, she says yes. So the processing error on the emails, and overseas email addresses was in the XLS, which I assume is the conflict, the COA form.
Okay.
That's probably the COA.
Okay. Yeah, please email me and give me more details about that. I haven't seen that issue or foreign email addresses.
I'll capture that and we'll test
Okay.
it and see what we find. But yeah, we should be allowing
we should
extensions other than .edu or .org. Or
yeah, that should be allowed. Any other questions? Lots of questions.
Yes, she says, she confirms, yes, it was COA.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. Please let me know if there's questions you wanted to ask, but you didn't get a chance to. My email address is syee@nsf.gov. And remember, if you're working on a proposal and you need help, call ITF Center right away. They are very, very helpful. Get your problem documented and call us as soon as possible. All right. Thank you.